I'm live, alive, oh. I'm reading BLISS, Afterlife. It's a story I started writing in 2006 and continued it, book 1, until 2017. So quite a long time. It took me, I wrote only on and off when I was traveling and when the muse kissed me. I am now in chapter 88 and I stopped earlier, and I'm continuing chapter 88 now, which is the time before the New Year's Eve. In fact, it is New Year's Eve day. I want to get changed too. How about you, Susan? Was what Holly said to her sister. Yep, I brought this lovely top. I shall get going. She took her glass and went to her room, Tony's old bedroom, which still looked like a boy's room. David was going to stay in the little study, in the spare room along the hall. It was newly decorated and had another look to it, a completely new look. He'd be sleeping here, she thought. What will it be like, I wonder? She put some quiet meditation music on to get dressed and ready. Recently she had discovered that she really liked these beautiful recordings, which are in frequencies, which resonate with the chakras, and she was quite hooked on them. Susan had always been a little curious about how easily her mom and Holly meditated and were able to feel at ease. She felt often that time spent doing that meant you had nothing better to do. The refuge was so busy, and as far as she was concerned, the people here had real problems, and no amount of meditation would change that. Of course, this was wrong, and for quite some time Susan had found herself delving into the more ethereal realms. Since her mum had died, she felt this great need to find a purpose for her life, or for everything. Only recently, this is really faint. Only recently, it had occurred to her that actually she was doing exactly that, living her purpose by running this refuge. She had not talked much with Holly about this. They got on so well anyway, and both having grown up with BLISS, they were both used to metaphysical conversations. Although Susan had been adopted, it was so long ago that she never remembered the time before BLISS and Michael, her parents, had adopted her. They had told her early. She could not remember anymore how old she was. A baby she was when they had her, but she didn't know so much about it. She could not remember anymore how old her early days. Holly and her were equally loved. Susan hardly ever thought about her adoption, but she felt a little as an outsider sometimes over the years, as Holly and her mum were so in tune. For her dad had always managed to make her feel great. He had felt equally outside on some conversations. This recent discovery had been interesting. Her sister being a sound therapist, Susan was surprised that she had not discovered how interesting all this stuff was, with the healing frequencies of 432 Hz and what is called the God frequency of 528 Hz and so on. She was reluctant to talk to Holly about it, as this was something Holly would go on and about, and Susan wanted to discover this by herself. Well, she had discovered it, because she got herself some sound healing and frequency sound tapes and had them on in the background when she was working. She remembered that David had been a great thinker. Often she did not really understand what he was on about back in those days of the garage music, or better, music in the garage. They made music, but they also talked a lot. Often there were a dozen or so people. She remembered that David had so much to say about creating your own reality and how one had to align oneself to one's own truth. It's funny she remembered all this now. She was looking forward to him. She hoped he had continued exploring this kind of thing. She had only just gotten properly interested in it all and was excited to see him in less than an hour. She had finished dressing and was pleased with herself. Her figure was suddenly not so very different than it was when she was younger. She was glad for the last few years of walking a lot and discovering yoga. She smiled, glad the year was ending and a new one beginning. She sat down to close her eyes to let herself be taken away by the sounds. Hearing the doorbell, she came back into the room. Her heart started beating when she heard Holly almost shouting, "David, so lovely to see you. Come in, it's freezing. Susan is just coming." She heard her name being called, and after a quick look in the mirror to straighten her hair and adjust her new top, she walked into the hall. Gosh, he looked handsome to her, all red-cheeked, somehow more vibrant than when they had bumped into each other the last few days. David embraced her, and he smelled as good as he looked. "How are you? You look well, David." "Well, thank you, Susie." He laughed. He used to call her that for fun back in the days. "I visited the spa with Leni earlier today, really enjoyed the whole experience, and had a jolly lunch with her and another friend, Eva, a Russian lady who had just turned 80. They had me in stitches. Eva was so funny, her slight accent and the things she came out with. Her and Leni seemed to be really good friends. My auntie gives me hope for my old age. She still does Tai Chi and puts me to shame in the way she looks after herself. I think I shall have some New Year's resolutions." They wandered into the kitchen where Chris was heating the soup and had laid the table. He was opening a bottle of red and greeted David. "I have heard quite a lot about you, David. Lovely to meet you." "Really nice to meet you too, Chris. I'm so glad. Holly has been so happily married for such a long time. Over 20 years, right?" "Well, yes, well over 20 years. Can we please talk not about numbers tonight?" Holly tickled Chris. "We're trying to find the old couples. We're trying to fight the old couple syndrome, aren't we, Chris?" Yes, of course. But all of you guys must know each other near on, well, 40 years, right? Chris, numbers again. Stop it. You've never met David, and we have to get to know the now David. Much water under the bridge, hey, Dave?" Holly smiled at David. "Yes, indeed. You look great too, Holly. You must be, he laughed. "No numbers, okay? And you, Susie Q, you look fantastic." "You're not so bad yourself, Mr. D." They laughed. She used to call him that in the old days. She could not remember why now, but they shared a look which seemed to send shivers up her spine. What's everybody drinking? Let's fill our glasses and have a toast on our pre-New Year's get-together. Tomorrow we have a few more people here. Evelyn will come and bring a friend. Who else, Holly?" Chris poured red wine, opened the ale, and everyone took their filled glasses to the conservatory. "I've asked our next-door neighbours, Monica and Tim, and that's it. I think that's enough, 8 of us, and we shall have a fondue, meat or shrimp or cheese, I'm not sure. Oh, what a good idea. I have not had a fondue for ages. Used to be so popular years ago, wasn't it?" "Yes, everybody had fondues, but it seems to have gone out of fashion. I found a perfect set in the charity shop, and I still have another old one around from Mum, so we will have two separate ones if you want. I look forward to it. I've never used the one I bought. Let's drink to a happy time." Chris raised his glass, and they all laughed and drank, and they knew it would be a good time. Susan looked at David and was thrilled to see that he looked at her the way he used to so many years ago. "It's going to be a great new year," she thought, and almost welled up thinking that she will be a grandmother and fall in love all at the same time. Isn't life interesting? Everybody laughed and drank. Chapter 89, New Year's Eve. Tony was getting dressed. He had it's too dark. He had surprised Melanie yesterday with 2 tickets to a New Year's Eve event. It had been advertised locally as a romance New Year's Eve with fun and laughter, and it was held in a local little clifftop hotel. He liked that. Oh, it paused. I don't know. I don't know when. Tony was getting dressed. He had surprised Melanie yesterday with 2 tickets for a New Year's event. It had been advertised locally as a romantic New Year's Eve with fun and laughter, and was held in a local clifftop hotel. It had been renovated and looked fantastic, all Art Deco and somehow cozy. He had a drink there with Peter when he was into architecture, and he loved the old-fashioned hotel overlooking the sea. There was going to be a dinner and a comedian and dancing afterwards. He got the 2 last tickets and was chuffed with himself that he had acted so quickly when he saw the poster on the high street. He had cooked Melanie spaghetti bolognese, who came over when she had settled back the night before, and she was so pleased about going out tonight. Perfect idea, she had said to him, and she had given him a little basket of German delicacies, with black bread and pâté and German salami, marinated mussels, biscuits, and lots of different yummy things. Some they had talked about when they both discovered their German ancestry. She had bought all of these with Oma and packed them into a basket she had in the attic. "We share this," she said. I was counting on it. They had had a lovely evening, and she left just before midnight, although they had exchanged rather exciting kisses before she finally left, with him singing "Oh baby, it's cold outside." She almost ran out. He smiled to himself. Buying these tickets had been a spontaneous inspiration, and even though they had set him back more than he usually spent on New Year's Eve, he felt great and looked forward to the evening. He had been standing in front of his wardrobe contemplating what to wear. He never worried about his clothes much and was scratching his head. 5 shirts and 2 pairs of trousers were on the bed. "What's the matter with me? Just take a shirt and pair of trousers and a jacket." He'd taken pieces whilst he was talking to himself, and when he was dressed he thought that he looked actually good, and it had been an excellent choice. His mum had given him the dark pink shirt for Christmas, and they were laughing about the colour when his mum had said, "Pink looks great on a real man." And he thought she was right. He smiled. Was he a real man? What is a real man? His mind was wandering around this question, and he poured himself a glass of red wine to sit and listen to music for a while and relax. He had spoken to his mum earlier. He could hear the laughter and music already in the background. He was looking forward to meeting David. He thought it was fascinating that his mum and him had been in a group of friends that made music in the garage when they were around his age now. And this David had gone off to Australia, and no one had seen him since. His aunt went Christmas shopping in the same shop he was, and that his aunt and David had been going out together before his dad, Steve, came on the scene. Or until David went away. He did not know all the details, and it was probably a bit of a touchy subject. His mum never talked about this David to him, and Christmas was the first he'd heard of it. He had told Melanie everything about it, and she was now as keen to meet David as he was. They had never stopped talking last night. She was telling him all about her Oma having been friends with his Omi. They couldn't even get over the coincidences of it all. Somehow it all felt right that she went off after a few hot kisses. They were both buzzing with all the things occurring in the last few months. He had definitely felt that Melanie wanted a little bit of time, and somehow he felt there was no need to hurry. They got on so well already, planning stuff to do in the new year, and even though there were moments last night where he had consciously distracted himself, as he could just get lost in looking at her, talking so animately about the way she thought and what she thought. She had mentioned that she had always needed time to process things. Seeing his grandmother in a vision whilst he was having a bath was so intriguing to him. She had said that she meditated regularly and that she found London a very bustling place, where she had a job, being in a good alignment. She used this word a lot and changed the subject when he tried to probe a bit further. He knew there was something she was not talking about, but somehow he felt this had to evolve over time. He kept having to think of his Oma. Talking about her last night had brought her back so clearly in his mind. He calls her Omi, she calls hers Oma. Not just this was rather magical. He thought he could have sworn he smelled her perfume when he was listening to Melanie, talking about her. He felt sure he had dreamt about her. Waking up, he had laid there for a while his eyes still closed. The sun had been creeping over his face, and he could clearly remember her voice and the things she talked about to him when he was a little boy. He was dreaming about a time he had been alone with her at their weekend place by a lake near Hamburg. He so loved being with both his Obi and Omi, or even the whole family with Ben and his aunt and uncle. But that weekend, for some reason, his granddad was not there, and he had the whole 2 days just with him and her, Bliss. They had baked a cake and swam in the lake. She had read him a story, and then she talked to him. Together, he sat with her on the settee, where she was massaging his feet. No one was like his Omi. His love for relaxing massages definitely stemmed from his Omi, always being so touchy-feely, lots of kisses and hugging. His mum was really no different, but then there was something about his grandma which seemed to allow him to be just himself, and he loved it when she talked to him. Sometimes he fell asleep, but often he would just sit there and let it wash over him. His alarm went off. Like his dad, he would put a timer on when he had to be sure to be out of the house in a particular time. He must have dropped off. He was going to text Melanie, pick her up in 10 minutes. They would go straight to the hotel. They had decided to drive there and walk back. They both decided to have a drink. It was a 10-minute drive, but they had decided to walk along the beach home, which he thought would be lovely. The new year will have started well, and they would pick the car up the next day. Have a good Thursday.